And good evening, everyone. Welcome to Edge of Reality TV. I am Willie Hassell, along with Lynn Nickerson, and we will be your hosts for the next hour as we discuss all things paranormal, supernatural, conspiracy theories, and all of those things that are just somewhat out of the range of the normal, average, everyday thinking. So good evening, Lynn. How are you doing tonight?
Good evening, Willie. Just fine.
Just
We won't
fine?
get into too much paranormal tonight, but
No, actually, we have this more of a
spooky,
conspiracy. More of a
Myster-
conspiracy tonight.
mysterious
yes.
stuff. That's what I
Yes.
wanted to say. Mysterious.
Mysterious stuff, okay. And so we do have a great guest in the studio with us here. And so on the show tonight, we are happy to welcome our friend Andy Kitt. And Andy is the founder and director of the Kitt Research Initiative, the Center for Consciousness Studies in Greenland, New Hampshire. He is also a paranormal investigator and the author of Ghosts, Science, and the Number 42. Welcome to the show, Andy.
Welcome,
having
Andy.
me.
Hey, it's
Our
a pleasure to
pleasure.
have you. Thank you for coming down on this miserable night.
It's not raining inside.
No, but it's
Yeah, but there's no
it's
heat.
chilly.
No heat,
It's
right.
chilly. I think it's going to snow
we're
pretty
dry.
soon. So we figured, well, tonight's actual topic is, of course, conspiracy theories, and we're going to talk about the 9/11 attacks. But before we get into that, you want to just tell us a little bit about the center and what you do there? And
Okay, it all started off sort of with ghost hunting. From there, you start seeing more and more of these peripheral topics. I mean, virtually everything you talked about that you cover, spirituality, cryptozoology, all these things. The moment you step across the threshold and realize that, yes, ghosts are real, all of a sudden these other things become more believable. So I set up a center where people can come down and either engage conversationally or hear presentations or lectures on any of these topics, anything that doesn't have like a routine presentation space somewhere. So essentially we do what you do with your show, but we do it in a local level. Individuals either present or, like I say, we do community just conversations.
And it's instructional, too.
We
You have
definitely do
classes.
instructional stuff. So
yeah, I know you have a lot of great programs over there.
It's a real help to the community.
Yeah.
I love going there.
me too.
Yeah,
What's
it's
up
a lot
with
of fun. Very educational.
And you are also an author.
Yes, before, I think it was before, no, it was after I started the center. I wrote a book describing why I got into the ghost hunting part and just how the process can be done better, some of the responses to skeptics, is all the information I had available to me at the time. That's before I went back to school and started pursuing advanced degrees. But essentially, there's a lot of good people out there with good intent, but not necessarily good methods.
Mm-hmm.
So I just pointed out some of the places where they either they're strong or they're short, in both the skeptic and the investigator side, with recommendations on how you might pursue it a little better. So.
And how exactly did you first get into the interest in ghost hunting?
I met a ghost.
You met a ghost.
Back in,
That's a good reason right there.
2007, my father died, and my father did not believe in survival at all. He didn't believe in any of it.
When you're dead, you're dead, right?
He was, life is a switch, when you're dead, you're dead. And after he passed, I helped my mother settle into living by herself for the first 6 weeks. And for those 6 weeks, my father did everything possible to prove that, oh, by the way, I was wrong. You are not dead. And just, I mean, there was no single, well, there were a few events that just were so bizarre that, something is going on. But it was just this mass of events, little things and big things and nonsense things. Then it just, a concentration of events like that. I mean, literally, we're talking 20, 50 events a day, almost to poltergeist levels, except you don't actually see objects move. And
What was
all
your
of the-
mother thinking at this time? Was she picking up on this?
Oh, yeah.
Or was she in denial?
Oh yeah, some of the stuff, just when they'd happen, we just sit there and say, hi, Pa, and, walk away from it, But
Yeah.
when it happens that frequently, you can't ignore it, and you just recognize, thanks, yep, we get it, let's go back to, we're still alive, get over it, Pa, So, yeah, but yeah, it was an interesting time. Then when I got back to New Hampshire, this all happened in upstate New York. When I got back to New Hampshire, I just wanted to talk to other people about some of the stuff I experienced. Excuse me. So I ended up finding meetup.com, which is supposed to be like a social networking thing for people with similar interests. And there was nobody within 100 miles that wanted to talk about ghosts or spirits, so
Boston,
I started a
maybe.
group. So I couldn't find any, but I mean, this was 2007.
Yeah, a while ago.
So I mean, Ghost Hunters TV show
Ghost
just got
Hunters
back on the air.
Yeah, it just came out.
So, but yeah, so I started the group, and that original group was Seacoast Paranormal, which still is out there. After a while, Seacoast Paranormal was open membership, so anybody could come investigate with us. But the problem is not everybody is willing to do the same amount of work, so we took maybe the top 4 people who were willing to put in effort, and we started KRI with that, with the idea of coming up with better methods to do the things that other people are doing.
It's a good idea. I think there's a need for that around here.
So,
Yeah,
and-
Good
yeah,
news.
definitely.
right.
So,
Well then,
Well then,
moving into
controversy,
9/11.
maybe?
Yeah, how many lectures do you put on? You don't put on too many there.
I
know
don't
that
right
you
now
teach,
because
but
I do because of the school stuff. Once I have my degree, then I'll be a lot more free to do it. I'll probably also, take it on the road, and I have another book that hopefully will be coming out shortly after I graduate,
wonderful,
and
wonderful.
that will be upsetting a lot of people because,
Upsetting a lot of people?
yeah, there's a lot of atheists out there who do not believe in any form of higher power, when clearly the evidence all suggests there is. I'm not going to sit there and say it's God, but you could put that tag on it and it would work. So, but whatever, there is another order. There is top-down processing going on in the world, and people need to recognize that,
Yep.
which will certainly upset every skeptic out there. And if you don't actually put the God name on it, anybody who is religious would be upset by that. So,
Well, at least you're not going to be upsetting people within your own group. That's what I thought you meant, like people
I
in
don't
meetups.
know. Everybody has their own.
Well, they do,
opinions.
but I think the group you're with is pretty tight-knit, and they're all
Yeah.
very paranormally oriented.
Yes.
And I did forget to mention that in the introduction. You do have a master's degree in
In
psychology.
psychology.
Oh,
Right.
yes, most
And
important.
you are currently working on a PhD
Right.
in
In visual
Visual-
psychophysics. So
visual
which is a
psychophysics.
very narrow field in psychology.
Physics. Oh, briefly, what is that?
Well, my dissertation is specifically on how we perceive depth based on the perspective of 2 eyes, stereopsis.
But it's a
psychophysics is how the brain interprets the environment,
Oh,
essentially.
okay.
So you got sensation is all these real-world signals, hits the body and gets transduced into neural signals, and those neural signals get converted into ideas in the brain, and that's process from sensation to perception is called psychophysics.
And it does include beyond the light spectrum that we can visually see, doesn't it? Are you saying that those ends of the spectrum influence what we see?
Repeat that?
The ends of the spectrum, we can see a certain, okay. Are you saying that included in this study are the extreme ends of the spectrum so that they also influence what we see? Does that take into your?
That is something I would look at after I have my degree, but right now I'm focusing on a very specific
Okay.
topic. As far as the visible light spectrum, how much do we see beyond? Well, we do and we don't.
Well, for instance, ghosts, where would that fall into the light spectrum? What would you say?
Honestly, I don't think it does.
Oh, okay.
So there's a
Might be another dimension.
You mean outside of the visible spectrum? Where does that fall?
yeah, it's a little more involved with that. The thing is that it's hard to separate what we are sensing from what we are perceiving sometimes. When the sensation is the physical response of the eyes. And if the eyes are picking it up, then you have the other task of getting past your mental blocks or whatever that are, some people just absolutely refuse to believe in the existence of ghosts. So even if one stood in front of them, they wouldn't see it. it wouldn't make sense to them. So their their visual system would literally
Block it
just
out.
reject it. And
Yeah.
they would see it as a blur. They might not see anything at all. And there's been several documented cases where people have, several witnesses to the same apparition.
Yeah, and they have
3 out of
different-
5 saw it, and
different
2 saw
feedback.
nothing, even though they were staring right at it.
And so it's the interpretation of the brain then of what you're seeing is what you're saying.
It could be, or
Yeah.
there could be very physical limits to the body, but there's no way to really test that without going on site with equipment that can actually break down the visual spectrum and see what physical light is actually present. And then there's things you can do to the individuals to test how sensitive they are to various frequencies. And you can test things, but you have to know the topic before you know what you can
Yeah.
test.
Right.
And that's probably the biggest problem with amateur ghost hunting, is that they're aware of some of the sciences involved, but they don't have enough in-depth information to make it work for them in order to move information forward. And that's kind of what's needed. You can't really, there's a lot of conflicting information out there that would be settled if somebody went in there with the right attitude, the right knowledge, and the right equipment.
All right, aside from your psychological background and your paranormal background, why is it that you started focusing on the 9/11 conspiracy?
You know, that kind of happened by accident. Somebody just pointed out to me saying, you know, you don't just disregard it. And after looking at things like Reiki, which, 10 years ago I would have said it's garbage.
Yeah.
There's nothing to it. Then, I read the research and it's like, no, as a matter of fact, Reiki is reliable enough to the American Hospital Association actually recommends a Reiki practitioner in every hospital. And there's some other things. I didn't believe in mediums at first. I didn't believe in most of this stuff at first. So it's okay. Let's at least look at the evidence.
So
Took
what
one
triggered
website.
that? What triggered your interest in even investigating the investigation?
And somebody said, don't blow it off till you look at it. So I gave it a chance. I looked at it,
Okay.
and all you have to do is watch the buildings fall. And it's like, that violates all laws of physics. So what did they say happened? Oh, no, that's completely impossible. The government explanation can't happen. Just physically impossible. Cannot happen.
Well, I think it's important that the audience knows that the 3 buildings collapsing was an example of controlled demolition. It wasn't just the steel melting, which is a really big factor in this whole argument. And in the report, another important factor is Building 7, which was the 3rd building, fell later on during the day, but nothing was mentioned in the report, the commissioner's report, that the government had ordered. So just at face value, people start thinking, what really did
First,
happen?
most people aren't even aware 3rd building fell.
I know, there's
And
very
they're
little
certainly not aware of
publicity
the
on
fact that it was a 47-story building.
That's
a
right.
really big building.
And it was the only building of the complex that housed offices of the CIA and the FBI.
And Security and Exchange Commission and a few
Yeah.
other federal
Makes you
organizations.
think that if you wanted to get rid of some evidence,
It's a
get
good
rid of some
building.
documents,
And it's the only building that fell down that was never hit by a plane.
it wasn't hit by a plane.
And one of them that got hit by a plane didn't actually fall down. It just had a big hole in it. So,
Yeah, that's the Pentagon, but.
but that's allegedly hit by a plane because
Yeah.
that has problems all its own. So,
Okay, so when you started looking at this, another big issue was the eyewitness reports.
Yep.
And of course, everybody was saying that, oh yeah, the plane ruined the infrastructure of the buildings, but number one, there were like 47 steel girders at the center of the building, and that should have held the building up. And also, too, there were people like firemen, policemen, people in the street. They heard explosions, one after the other, popping, and then fire on different levels, which really didn't coincide with the planes hitting. So moving on from there, it was pretty clear that there were power outages since like the end of August sometime. Trucks were seen driving up to the buildings around 3 a.m. and they'd leave at 5 a.m. just before all the office workers would get there. So they were seen unloading stuff. Also, too, during these power outage periods, the CCTV cameras were all shut off because of the power outage. So there was a whole lot of premeditated
Perfect time to
planning going on.
perfect time to be coming in and rigging and planning.
the thing you got to remember though, it's actually simpler than that. Those buildings were having their asbestos insulation replaced.
Oh, were they?
Oh, yeah.
So, and the company that did it also specializes in demolitions.
Ah,
So
that's a
you know,
factor I didn't know.
Yeah, so it would have, I mean, they would have been completely above suspicion going in there because that's what they were there for.
Yeah.
And all these things, when you remove the insulation, nobody checked to see what they were, if they were adding anything. And I'm not accusing anybody. This is just a
Yeah,
possibility.
We're just discussing facts
but-
here, but
You know, what happens after hours, I mean, except for security staff, no one knows. You know, individual offices, how many of them had their, you know, their own CCTV, or how many relied on building security? So what exactly went on?
I think hallways, stairwells, elevators, those all would have their own cameras.
You would expect.
Yeah, not necessarily offices, but
So, but that's not a requirement. How they did it isn't a requirement to recognize that it happened.
that's right.
You know, the laws of physics were, the pancake theory is impossible, cannot happen. The building wasn't built that way. You can have all of the floors drop out of the building. It was designed to have the floors removable so people could have cathedral ceilings if they wanted them.
Yeah.
So if every one of those floors fell out, they would just stack at the bottom, but it wouldn't do anything to the walls. And the way that, I mean, it's literally, it's a tube within a spike within a tube structure. So that's all those center supports where all the elevators and everything are, that should have stayed intact. The outside shell should have stayed intact. At worst, you'd have an unzipping effect where the shell, the outer shell would split and, you know, like somebody unzipped it and it just peel
Yeah,
out.
yes, I did see
And,
that rendition.
According to one of the videos I watched, one of the structural engineers said that those towers actually were designed to take the impact of multiple airliners.
They were designed to take the impact of a fully fueled 707.
Yeah, and probably multiple airliners, they said.
Well,
So,
I don't know
But-
about multiple,
Yeah.
but it's in the design specs that the 707 is only slightly smaller than the planes that actually hit. But yes, it was designed to take that impact.
right.
Now, oddly
And
enough,
other planes have hit buildings in New York City with, I mean, the Empire State
but you
Building
still
got
have the
hit by
steel
a bomber.
structures remaining.
Right, so,
So in the 9/11 Commission report, they indicated, I don't know if they came right out and said it, but they said that the center of the buildings were hollow because that's where the elevator shafts and the stairwells were. And then conversely, they showed pictures of the towers when they were being constructed, and it showed all of the steel girders poking up in the middle, so there was definitely the structure there. So that was completely a lie.
I had somebody tell me that the outside of the building is glass. And it's like, no, what holds the glass up? The glass does. Okay, you know, people will say anything to hold together that, no, that was a
that
terrorist
theory.
incident. Yeah, it's a terrorist. The question is, who's the terrorist? You know, it's, whatever happened, the building did not fall down because it got hit by planes.
No.
You know, I do stand by the fact that they probably were hit by planes. There's a lot of really interesting theories and interesting points made too that suggest either the planes weren't, you know, the planes were painted in, and there's ways to test that, you know, given time, maybe I'll go and do that. But there's,
The planes were what?
were photoshopped in.
Oh, okay.
You can do that on the fly, and there's, you know, some of the video. The problem is that the video is really sketchy. There's only a couple of videos out there that are,
they're clear?
the ones that people saw. You know, there's a couple of extra versions, but they didn't show up till after the fact. They weren't aired live, so
Right.
people have no recall. And if you play, let's say there's 5 videos, each from a different perspective of the incident, and only one of them gets played later, then there's a memory interference effect that goes into effect where people remember the later one as if it was the first one. So there's a lot of things that could be done, but looking at, there's a silhouette of a plane blown out of a building, so I'm saying a plane hit it. You know?
That's what it looked like.
The problem is an airliner can't do that. An airliner is basically a tin can. It would be like throwing a tin can at the building.
Right, it would
Yeah,
crumble.
the
Plane would crush.
fuselage and the wings are made of what, aluminum?
Yes, yes.
So
The
aluminum
densest parts of
against
the plane.
steel?
The densest parts of the plane could possibly penetrate. That would be the engines. And
That would be the center of it, yeah.
Not the center, just
Not
the
even the
landing
center?
carriage at the base of the center. So the landing gear could go through because of the density of the wheels and stuff and the gear itself. but the shell of the plane, there's planes out there that, you know, a bird hits the front nose and it leaves a hole in the plane. You know,
Yeah.
what happens when a building hits it at 500 miles an
Yeah.
hour? And then there's the problems of the flight speed. They're saying they were going 500 miles an hour, and the planes
They
can't
couldn't
do
that
that.
low, no,
They
not that
cannot
low.
do
The
that.
767 anyway could not go that slowly, that low, that quickly, that low.
None of them could.
Yeah.
None of them could. Just air density, the plane's not designed for that. They would shudder and shatter and be gone. But there is reason to believe that, I mean, clearly planes hit the building, so what happened? And there's reason to believe that an armored plane might be able to do that, and similar planes are used by the U.S. military. And none of the videos give you a clear enough view of the plane to actually see any kind of markings.
Most of them are
Right.
blurry, they're at a distance.
Well,
And
people
most of them do look like just a plain gray
They look like,
plane.
yeah, with
Although
no
I did see,
markings.
I did see one video that you could tell there was like red markings on the tail. But
Oh, you did?
only one, yeah,
I
only
cou- I
one.
didn't
Most
see
of them,
that.
they were just, you couldn't tell.
And another thing too, right afterwards, I don't know if it was CNN, but some news station tried to go around, these reporters and little henches for the media, buying up other people's video cameras, their tapes and stuff. They bought quite a few.
I don't know that that would be suspect, though, because it's news. And if you buy the camera and get the recording on it, you have
Well,
sole license to it.
There are only about 50, the narrator said between 50 and 60 videos of the buildings being flown into in existence.
Huh.
They tried to get rid of as many as they could.
I'm aware of 2 for the first impact, but there would be, I would guess there'd be,
That was according to just one
Dozens.
of the films I saw.
Right.
Yeah, between 50 and 60 films. And he played them sequentially so that you could see the plane striking from different angles, and a lot of it was blurry. You couldn't make out a great deal.
yeah, I'm not aware of that effort.
He was trying to dismiss the idea, or at least support the idea, that something other than planes hit the building, or at least other than passenger planes. Because this is something I want to get to in a minute, but since we're touching on it now, there is a theory out there that the government had been working on a program where military planes would come and fly close to a passenger plane, and the difference would not be detected by the air traffic control
Right,
tower.
and there's
that the
evidence that
passenger
took
plane would go
place.
away, and then whatever the mission was for the military plane, they would continue on.
And that actually, there's evidence that that took place up by Griffiths Air Force Base in Utica or Rome area, upstate New York.
Okay.
And welcome back to Edge of Reality TV. I'm Willie Hassell, along with Lynn Nickerson, and tonight's guest is Andy Kitt from the Kitt Research Initiative in Greenland, New Hampshire. Welcome back, Andy.
Actually, we're in Stratham now.
The Kitt Research Initiative in Stratham, New Hampshire. Did I say Greenland at the beginning of the show, too?
Yes, you did.
Well, that's because you used to be in Greenland.
Yes, we opened
Yes.
in Greenland
And you
initially.
moved.
We're there for several years.
That's right.
And then we moved 5 miles down the road.
That's right. Okay.
So,
Oh, we got that straightened out. Good.
Yeah. I'm glad.
So, getting back to Building 7, there was something else I wanted to mention, which was there were some cops talking in the street, and they were trying to shoo people away from Building 7 because the cops said, "You got to get away, that building's coming down." And that was on tape.
there's a lot of, the owner of the building mentioned something about pulling it before the building fell down.
Was that Silverstein? Is that his name?
Yeah, I believe so.
Didn't he change his insurance policy a day or two before?
It was several months before,
Yeah.
but yeah, and not only did he get paid, he got paid double because he actually had litigation, $3.5 billion was the payout on the policy, and he got it twice because 2 incidents, 2 planes hit.
Unbelievable.
So, and by the way, to build the new World Trade Center building cost $3 billion, $1 billion paid for by the city of New York, $1 billion paid for by the Port Authority, and $1 billion paid by Silverstein. So he netted $6 billion by having 2 planes crash.
Not too
crash the
bad.
building.
Good businessman.
And the term that he used to pull it is
Is-
actually a term that the demolition companies
He actually used the phrase pull it.
Yeah, that's the
So-
term that they use when they're ready to
pull it.
detonate a
Yes.
building.
Yeah.
So how they know that? No plane,
The,
so. And why that building?
the
CIA.
problem with it, I mean, if you just look at what happened, a building fell down, and at most, it got hit by debris from another building. Ooh, there's a big gash in it. That big gash did not
But that
explode.
didn't happen.
There's a number, 47-floor building that maybe caught on fire, caught a little debris, caught a couple, and no, that didn't fall down. It didn't have the reasons to fall down that 1 or 2 foot had, and 1 or 2 shouldn't have fallen down.
Yeah.
So you got 3 buildings. Honestly, the most disturbing part is the explanation of the Pentagon, because just everything they've described about that Pentagon is physically impossible.
We got to get into that, but one more issue with
Okay.
the towers I wanted to touch on, which was the accelerated heating of the steel girders. So about the only thing that they can attribute that to is the use of thermite, which is not a popular commercial accelerant. It's something that, well, the government happens to use it. But there is suspicion, well, they found byproducts of thermite in the dust, in the slurry from the buildings. So what kind of an indication would that be of?
There's a lot of problems with the debris from the building. The fact that they immediately bundled it up and shipped it off and got it the heck out of
True,
Dodge.
yeah, they got it. They got all the
That's
steel
really
girders out of
suspicious
there
to begin with.
immediately.
A number of people who,
Didn't they send them overseas and have them melted down?
that's my understanding, yes.
Into China.
Well, melted down what wasn't already melted
Well,
down.
yeah.
But,
The
but
rest
even
of the
as they were
evidence.
removing it, weeks after the fact, they were still encountering molten metal in the
Molten
debris.
metal on the ground,
which
yeah.
there is no natural fire that can do
No.
that. Thermite and thermate are special compounds that self-accelerate. Once it hits metal, it creates a chemical reaction that generates an extreme amount of heat, and yeah, it's designed to go through metal and goes through it very, very thoroughly.
Okay, so what about the inconsistencies with the Pentagon?
The problem with the Pentagon is you have a hole where a plane allegedly went through.
That is circular.
If you look at the initial photographs, immediately after the impact, before the building started collapsing in on itself, you can actually estimate the size of the hole, and the size of the hole is actually smaller than the size of the plane that allegedly hit it. That's not to
Kind of
mention
odd.
the fact that the densest part, when they said that the plane hit, the claim is that there aren't 2 holes for the engines because the engines folded in to the fuselage of the plane and
Oh, is
followed the
that
plane.
why? Oh, okay.
That's not possible. The plane doesn't drag the engines. The engines drag the plane. What you should have, if that could happen, is 2 holes where the engines hit, and then the fuselage would choose which engine to rip apart and follow in. The engines drive the plane, not the plane drives the engine. So the force should have come from the engines. There should be at least 2 major impact points, presumably a third, because again, the landing carriage is centrally located, and that's very dense also. But the plane itself could not possibly have made that hole.
A circular
Not
hole.
possible.
No.
So reinforced, what was it, 18 inches reinforced rock? It's not happening, And
And
it
all
wouldn't
of-
have penetrated once, twice, 3 times. The central hole was very, very small relative to the outer hole. And there's not a lot in the military that can do that either, But there's no way a commercial plane, there's nothing, no commercial
Yeah.
plane in the world, no military plane that can do that just by crashing into it.
And given that it was the Pentagon, that place is just crawling with cameras, and the CCTV was turned off.
Yeah, and you had to, what was it, an ATM at a gas station or something is the only video they have where
Yeah.
you see, I don't know, maybe that's something, but that's definitely an explosion, but nothing in the middle. It's just nuts.
So just can you throw out there what you think was happening with the Pentagon? Why was the Pentagon even targeted? Another
Because,
false flag,
by
but
the way,
why that section?
You have a Pentagon-shaped building, an airliner coming in from this direction. First question is, okay, you see the Pentagon and you want to hit it. You don't broadside the wall, which is the thickest part. You dive the plane into the center.
Yeah, you don't come in
and hit the roof,
yeah.
you know, because the roof
Yeah.
is always and
the biggest target.
And the pilot didn't have the skills to do it. I mean, bear in mind, these guys trained on Cessnas. That's like training on a Mazda Miata to drive a tractor trailer. You just don't go from one to the other without any training. You know, that's not even counting the fact that the airliner is all run electronically, and it's a completely different machine. And yet this guy, who, by the way, my understanding is the guy who piloted the plane allegedly piloted the plane into the Pentagon, did a low altitude U-turn at ground. I mean, low altitude is in almost ground level.
Oh, really? Again,
skilled pilots
they couldn't
can't do
do
that. And, you know, and brought it around and did this to hit this one area, which was, by the way, the newly renovated and completely vacant records section of the Pentagon.
Ah, but the vacant records
Well,
section.
they just overhauled that side. They just finished a bunch of work on it. So there was nobody in that part of the building when it hit, and the plane went all the way around just to hit that in a very complex maneuver that the pilot couldn't possibly have done to hit that part of the building. Yeah, that's a little suspect.
Yeah, that's a stretch. So was there ever a commission report done on that?
NIHC, somebody, some Institute of Engineers did an analysis, but I'm not aware of the government thing. Like I say, this wasn't my focus. I focused on the physics of the falls on 1, 2, and 7, but I'm aware of, I mean, there was a website out there, Find the Boeing or something like that, where, you know, it's like, yeah, an airplane didn't do that.
I don't think anybody was killed at the Pentagon, is that right?
Well, certainly the people on the plane would have been.
Well, we don't think that there were people on
Was
the
there
plane.
really anybody on the plane?
Well, okay.
Was there really a plane?
That's an interesting question, because there's some people out there saying that the
Believe
planes,
it was a missile.
at least one of the 4 planes never left, never took off. You certainly have at least 2 planes that probably didn't hit their buildings, disappeared. So those passengers on those planes probably are dead, but not from hitting a building, you know? Yeah, I mean, they're really screwy things going on.
It is really military base people. Now, what about all of the phone calls, all of the cell phone calls? It was stated that regardless of whoever the carrier was, that the cell phones would not carry above 8,000 feet.
And I've heard that story. Cell phone, there are limits. When they give you limits like that, those are like the maximum. That's, if you go past that, that's when it starts getting sketchy. It works within that range. So
That's right,
some of them could have worked outside of that range. In fact, people have actually tested it that it could have.
That's right, less than 8,000 feet.
Yep.
One worked at 1,000, another one worked at 4,000, another one at 8,000. But how about higher than that? There's sort of an indication that if those calls were made, that perhaps they were made from the ground elsewhere, maybe like parked at a military base.
Have you ever listened to any of the recordings of those phone calls?
I have.
Did you
and
listen
the
to the guy who, he calls his mother, and I don't remember that guy's actual name, but he says, "Hi, Mom, this is your son, Ed Jones."
It was the Hansons, I think. He
I can't
seemed
recall
totally unemotional.
Well, he
Yeah, I did
used
hear that
his
one,
last name to tell his mother who he was.
that I
Mom,
didn't catch.
this is your son, Ed Jones. Who does that?
That's
No, I
rather
didn't
strange,
catch
yeah.
that.
And there's other aspects of it that strongly suggest at least some of those audios were, or some of those phone calls were staged.
Well, here's another really way out there idea, but it's known that there's technology out there to replicate people's voices, the timbre and the frequency of people's voices.
There wouldn't be any need.
Well, if they were creating all those cell phone calls.
You do know that the military maintains troops of actors, right? I'm not kidding. I actually worked with them.
Well, don't you think that parents would recognize their children's voices?
You would think, right?
Yeah, but who knows? Who knows?
But why did he say, "Hi, Mom, this is your son, Ed Jones.
For the record, that's why. Yeah.
It had nothing to do with Mother hearing it.
No,
had to do
it
with
didn't.
everybody else.
So what do you suppose happened to those purported passengers from United 175 and American Airlines Flight 11?
Really interesting questions. I know somebody who has a friend of a relative's friend, yada, 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 through a chain, but knows somebody who's actually supposedly died on one of those planes. And the thing is, I have no reason to doubt him. I'm not going to trace it to make sure it's not somebody just, blowing smoke up his butt or something. But let's say that's true. Well, then they were either relocated or murdered. But they're not around anymore, are they?
They don't seem to be. The same thing with, I think it was United. Was it United Flight 93 in Pennsylvania, Western Pennsylvania? Now, that was odd too, and
That's
apparently
where the bogus phone calls allegedly were coming from, because that was the only plane that was in the air for a while. And they were aware of the other two planes hitting the World Trade Center.
Yeah.
And why they were allowed to make these phone calls in the first place. Bear in mind, cell phone technology, there weren't a lot of cell phones.
Yeah, that was 15 years ago.
It was a lot different then than it is
It was
now.
the air phone, not the cell phone back then.
Yeah.
You called from the back of the seat in front of you,
Yeah.
and that's how it worked. So there weren't a lot of cell phones. They said that's why the range thing is such a big deal, because there weren't towers all over the middle of Pennsylvania.
Yeah, they were saying that they were going, well, if you're going too fast, then it's too fast for the towers to hand
keep
off
up.
the signal, and they drop the calls.
Yes.
So how were the calls made? So it makes me think the planes or wherever they were calling from, they were at a stationary point.
That's entirely reasonable to suspect something is wrong.
Yeah.
But to actually nail it down and do anything at this point, I think would be really challenging. For me, it would be challenging. I'm guessing there's electronics and communications experts out there who can give better information than I can.
Okay, what about the fact that those films, those video clips are hard to see, they're blurry. But this one guy, his name is Richard Hall, he's trying to support what he feels is his theory, he says, but it's open to change. The theory being that it was not planes that hit both of the towers. And you look at them and they sort of look like planes, but they're all blurry. He suggested that it could have been like a Tomahawk missile, and that either it could have been camouflaged holographically, that was one possibility, or it could have been military planes hitting the building.
I did look into that. My personal guess would be they were military substitutes. Like I say, I am aware that the military uses similar aircraft. I mean, it's the same Boeing model, just outfitted differently and armored, which would explain penetration. I am definitely aware of the Tomahawk substitution, and the only evidence I came up with to support that even a little bit is a couple of people as the planes were approaching, were on the air, and one of them sat there and said, "Oh my God, it sounds like a missile." And it was a person with military experience.
Yeah.
Who, I mean, airliners sound different, but
Well,
that's one piece, and clearly there were outlines of planes embedded in the building. Problem is, they shouldn't have done that.
Yeah.
So whatever caused that, the aluminum plane can't leave a plane. I mean, that was cartoon shaped, right up to the wingtips. Though there's zero possibility the wingtips can penetrate that building. Can't happen.
There was one report I saw that the second plane, how it hit the tower and everything like blasted out on the other side, all the debris. They found down in the street, like a block away, an airline jet
Piece of an engine.
Well, it was
the
a whole
wrong
engine.
plane.
It was a whole engine.
Well,
the
turbine of the engine, one of the.
But it was not the same type of engine
Right,
that was used on that.
It was not the
on that
civilian
plane.
version. It was the military version of the engine piece found. Ooh, that actually is a really strong piece of evidence that there was a substitution there.
I would think so.
Yeah.
So, plus littering the debris. Bear in mind, we're talking about a plane hits a building. How many pieces of paper can be identified out of an inferno like that, going out the other side of the building?
Right.
And yet, one of the hijackers' passports was found
Right.
intact. Some of the things, and the idea that all this intense heat was caused by the plane was pretty much ruled out when, just a few minutes after the impact, one of the survivors from the building is actually holding onto the metal where the plane came in, waving for help. It's like, that building's not hot. You know, it's certainly either that or she has some special powers that, you know, wow, it's just staggering.
They also talked about a directed energy weapon. Now, she could have meant or indicated a missile, but what about laser energy? Do you think that was a possibility, any of
I
it?
am not aware of any technology that we have at this moment that can do that. So
Okay.
there's rumors that the Russians might have some type of particle beam weapon or something, but we're talking a fixed base where they launch the thing.
Would it be visible? Would it be like a green light or a red light type thing?
That I'm not aware of. I'm not,
Because that didn't show up.
you
So I
know,
didn't
the
know.
limits of technology, I'm very aware that the military has technology that we won't
Yeah, we
be
won't
able
know
to
about
have
for another 15
decades.
years, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
If ever.
But at the same time, I don't think this would be the moment to use it, not when there's such easy. Bear in mind, 6 months before 9/11, the whole scenario of remote piloting an aircraft into the World Trade Center was actually a TV show. That was an episode, the pilot episode of the Lone Gunman TV series.
The what?
Where the Lone Gunman TV series, it was
Oh.
a spin-off from the X-Files. Their pilot episode was somebody hijacking a plane by remote control and flying it into the World Trade Center.
Oh, that's
So,
scary.
Yeah, I want to say that was released June of the same year, so it'd only be like 3 or 4 months before. So it's like, wow, that's an interesting thing. So, and yeah, the tech to remote pilot is definitely out there. To set up a military aircraft that you can do that with, certainly doable.
Yeah.
Doing the swap over, Griffiths Air Force Base, certainly, in fact, the evidence suggests that happened.
Well, drones weren't in common use 15 years ago.
The tech was there. And by
Well,
the way,
yes, I
the
know, but the
drones-
public didn't know about it.
The drones are a little bit different in that the aircraft is designed for stealth, but to remote pilot, have been remote piloting radio-controlled aircraft for 30 years.
Really?
What's the difference? By the way, the planes are largely electronically controlled,
Yeah.
so it really, it's not the same thing as doing a really complex corkscrew turn to hit the side of a building. You're aiming at buildings that are, what were they, 400 feet wide? 1,000 feet in the air, and all you have to do is hit it somewhere. And yeah, I'm thinking the remote piloting is a very legitimate possibility.
Yeah, it's very
But then you have
viable.
the problem of, well, what happened to the real aircraft, the original aircraft? And
That
there-
concerns me
Where,
greatly.
where
Well,
did it go?
Where did those
there's-
people go?
Where'd the people go, yeah?
There's reports, bear in mind, once you shut off the transponder, it's hard to tell what the heck is in the air, in which they did shut off the transponders, so identifying the planes. The 2 fighters that were sent up as chase planes were actually told that the planes went past the World Trade Center. They went past New York City
Oh.
and went on the way out to sea, and that's what they went for. They went towards Jersey instead of towards where the planes were. And there is, all it takes is taking that plane out to sea and ditching it, and no one will ever see it again.
Well, when that military, in that instance where the military plane comes in and almost replaces the passenger plane, does the military plane take over the transponder code of the passenger plane, or do they both have the same code and the passenger plane just moves away?
The transponder code identifies the aircraft, so I imagine you can build another one,
I would think.
but they were off already.
Well, that's what they're saying for the Flight 175, that they had turned it off.
Right.
But if that wasn't a real flight,
The thing is that you can
Well,
follow
it was
planes
off, though.
to upstate New York. You can follow the first plane to upstate New York. Who was it? It's like a pilots association sat there and did a bunch of this research, but they did radar tracings and followed the plane and where it did its turnaround.
yeah, it did. It came
Overrun
down
New York,
south
and
and
then
it came back, headed
right.
north again.
And the other one came in essentially from a different angle. I lost my point, sorry.
Yeah, well, we were talking about the transponders and if they were
Oh,
the same for the 2 planes.
Transponder thing, electronic tech, you can do, especially people who build it, they can do whatever they want.
Were there any reports by any of the air traffic controllers about another plane coming in that could have been the drone plane? Was there any other? I saw only one other plane that seemed to fly by very quickly on some of the videos after the plane had hit.
Okay, there was definitely a passenger or a civilian aircraft, a large Learjet-like plane in the air at the
Okay.
time around New York City. So a lot of people sit there and see that and wonder what that is.
Okay, maybe that was
There
it.
was also, there's some reports that the plane that many witnesses saw flying at very low level in Washington, D.C., also left D.C. So, I mean, people saw a plane climbing after the explosion. So, I mean, there's, like I said, there's a lot of information out there. Picking and choosing that kind of stuff is very hard to do, 10 years after the fact.
Yeah.
There was a lot of disinformation thrown around, at the time. A lot of things didn't make the kind of media coverage they should have.
But if the evidence is destroyed, it's hard to put the pieces of puzzle
But at the
together.
same time, the primary pieces of evidence are the impacts, the visual images of the impacts,
Demolition.
how the buildings fell down. Those
Yeah.
things, there's no erasing that. That's still available. I can go online,
Yeah.
go to the Internet Archive, the actual videos as they were broadcast. Did you know that Japanese video switched to the impact literally seconds before the second plane hit?
They switched the
Yep,
impact?
they switched their camera to, I want to say it's one of the network's cameras. Literally, they had a TV show going, and they switched to live from New York seconds before the impact.
Really?
So they got to watch it live in Japan too. So they just turned it on. Yeah, I mean, granted, this happened very close to 9 o'clock anyhow. So they might have switched to a live camera, but I mean, that's a really amazing coincidence. And
Yeah.
the fact that some cameras, I don't remember which one. It's been a while since I've looked at all this stuff. But first, several of the cameras are literally in line with each other. They're all taking it from the same perspective. One of the major broadcasting companies switched their feed to one of their competitors' cameras, which is another thing that they've got their own live cameras there. They've got several of them, in fact. And they switched to a competitor's camera.
Why do you suppose they did that?
That's a great question.
Why do you suppose they did that?
Trying to think of why they would do that, I would think somebody asked them to. So, and like I say, just there's all kinds of things that raise questions, and
Yeah.
without the physical evidence, just what you can actually see the building doing, there's enough reason to wonder, but you really can't say anything. But when you look at the actual collapse of the buildings, that defies physics. There is no way
Yeah.
a building can fall like that on its own. It can't happen. It can't. It's not, oh, maybe there is no circumstances, no set of circumstances by which a building can fall like that. There is no such thing as the pancake effect as described. That if the floors of the buildings fell, they would be separating from the walls, not taking the walls with
Yep,
them.
the metal has to melt first.
So, well, no, it's a matter of, it's just held in with bolts. The floors are held in with bolts. There's bolts on the end of
And
these
yet
beams.
they pancaked, so there was explosions and the metal
It had the-
melted.
The walls themselves had to be brought down. There's no amount of pancaking that can make that happen.
This-
And we're getting pretty close here. We've got about 3 minutes left.
I've got one
so-
other question I wanted to ask you. On the internet, I've noticed that people are starting to wonder whether or not Trump is going to address the issue with 9/11. What do you think about that?
I just don't. I'm very interested to see what Trump will do about anything, how he will handle his position. Personally, I think the guy, he's got a little bit of ego to him, but I think that might actually make him a great president. He will not settle for being mediocre. So I'm really kind of looking forward to seeing what he can and cannot do.
It almost looks like he's kind of in a hard place because, it had to do with former administrations, and I'm sure a lot of that's all, top secret and whatnot, so
I can
he's going to be in a hard position.
I can say with no doubt in my mind that anybody who could set up this event, keep it out of the public, turn it into a fringe theory, can control an incoming president.
Oh,
So and that's
They're
not
trying.
it's a singular event. There's a lot of things. I mean, the
lot of
conspiracy
questions.
around ET alone suggests that, you know, the evidence is really, really strong, and yet several presidents.
No disclosure.
I know that Jimmy Carter actually was an ET eyewitness. He
Yep.
saw
Yeah.
it, filed
He
his own
was.
report when he was governor of Georgia, and he actually stipulated that, yes, we're going to full disclosure. Then he becomes president and said, oh, by the way, what I saw in Georgia was Venus. It's like, okay, something happened to change his mind.
Yeah, it
And
was
when
after
you are in
they
a
sat
position
him
of
down
power
and
and
said,
responsibility, the problem for me is what's the motivation?
yeah.
And depending on how they frame the motivation, I can understand why a president would rather perpetuate the myth than create
Well.
a strong, undesirable situation.
Yeah, why buck the system, huh?
Right. We've survived.
Big system.
Now,
big-
why, you know,
yeah.
let's create a riot? I don't understand. Not in my administration, that's what I would say. So, you know, maybe the last day, you know, like Eisenhower's farewell address is, by the way, beware the environment, the military-industrial complex. So, you know, maybe, but I got to think probably not. So,
Okay, well,
Very enlightening.
we're just about down to the end of the hour.
Yes, thank you for all your
And,
opinions and your
yes.
facts.
All
And
right.
you've been listening to Edge of Reality TV. And we thank you very much to our guest tonight, Andy Kitt. It was a pleasure to have you on.
it's always a pleasure
Thank
to
you, Andy.
talk to y'all.
Okay. And so we will talk to you again next month.
Good night.
Good night, everybody.